基督sa mati我的名字是Don Rick，我是清华大学教授。And I guess I'm in the wrong country. Wait a second. I'm really delighted to be here. As usual, Mati steals my best quotation. He and I think the same way. He could read my mind, and the point that I'm going to make, he knows. He knows it's the most important one. But I'm going to use the same quotation in a minute to explain Donald Trump. My wife handed me her smartphone. In case none of you have been watching, Donald Trump, as we've been here, as Mati said earlier, has spoken to the United Nations, and he said in the UN, your countries are going to hell. Your countries are going to hell. Climate change is a con job, and London is adopting Sharia law, because there's a Muslim mayor of London, of course. So Donald Trump has made news while we're here. He is factual, as always. What I would like to do, since Kathleen did such a superb job of giving the facts, I want to be a little less unbiased. I mean, all my years in Washington, 29 years as a journalist in Washington, that was my job, to be fair to both sides. Now I've learned as a professor, I can be an analyst, which means I actually can offer a point of view. I try not to come from the left or right, but I can give my judgment. So forgive me if I do have some judgments about Donald Trump. We heard about the assaults on press freedom, right? But to me, what we have to realize is under the underlying ignorance of what is driving Donald Trump, not what he's actually doing. And what I mean by that is his ignorance of the law and the Constitution of America. Example, writing a bad story about him, as Mati said, that's really illegal. What law says it's illegal to write a negative story about the President of the United States or anyone? Right? That's really illegal, he said. Not objectionable, right? Not distasteful. That's really illegal. Well, yeah, you wouldn't worry, except that the same week he ordered his attorney general to go after his political enemies. And he fired a U.S. attorney who said that there was not sufficient not sufficient legal evidence to prosecute James Comey, the former FBI director, and the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James. Okay? He specifically said that. He put that on his, quote, Truth Social account. He ordered her to go after his enemies. So let's put one and one together. If he believes a bad story about him is really illegal and he is telling his attorney general to go after these people, what's next? Fortunately, it hasn't happened yet, but let's see what happens. He's also said journalists should not be allowed to criticize him. What does that mean? Right? It should not be allowed to criticize him. Does that mean it should be against the law? Does that mean that they should lose their jobs, like professors who have been fired around the United States? Also, criticism of him on TV. He said, quote, he said this on the 19th, it's no longer free speech if you criticize him on TV. That's not free speech. It doesn't apply. Free speech does not apply if you criticize him on TV. Why? He was asked. Well, he said, because TV networks are regulated and they don't have the right to criticize him. They have to be fair. Well, who decides what's fair? His Federal Communications Commission, which supposedly regulates communications in America. There are two problems there. One is free speech is free speech. It's in the Constitution, as Kathleen said. The second is the Federal Communications Commission does not regulate network television. Television networks are businesses in America. What the Federal Communications Commission regulates is local TV stations. If you're a TV station in a city, you get a license from the Federal Communications Commission. And Donald Trump has over and over said this, that he will take away the licenses of ABC, Disney, or the other networks. Networks are not regulated. So to me, what is as scary as what he's trying to do is his absolute ignorance and his willful ignorance of what the law is and the US Constitution is. He said criticism of him on TV, well, reporters who do it are doing it illegally and incorrectly, right? So criticism of him on TV is, okay, incorrect. I guess it's his definition, the same way as we've heard, hate speech is speech he hates. That's incorrect. But illegally, it's the same thing. To him, you are distasteful, you are incorrect, and you are illegal to criticize him. Okay. Then the late night stories. Right? We don't know where this Jimmy Kimmel tale is going, or the other comics. He still wants to get rid of 2 more late night comics, following in the lead of Goebbels, if you know your history going back to the early years of the Reich in Germany. He says late night shows aren't allowed to mock him. Right? This is not me making this up. He said this to the press pool. He said, reason? They're licensed. They're not allowed to do that. Comedians can make jokes, but not about him. Don't talk about his hair. Don't talk about his weight. Don't talk about anything. Don't talk about Jeffrey Epstein. They're licensed. And then I would think maybe their licenses should be taken away. Again, problem, he doesn't have the power to take away licenses from networks because they are not licensed. Secondly, doesn't it seem to you this might be a gross abuse of power that the president thinks he can do this when there is a right to free speech in America? Even his concept of this. Okay, so you have a president who is living in this world of manifest retribution against all of his enemies, real and perceived. All right, I've been negative. Now I want to give you the positive, because I am an optimist. But I'm also a historian. Here's the optimist. Trump is not popular. His popularity numbers have gone way down on almost every issue except racism, where his racist views seem to be pretty popular. But on almost everything else, he seems to be quite unpopular these days and going down. What he has done in the past week with ratcheting up the hateful speech, or his negative speech, I should say, I shouldn't be that judgmental on that, has not been well received. And some Republicans have, very few, but some have said he's gone a little bit too far in this past week. Second, he only has 3 years left in his term, right? And he eats a lot of Big Macs, and he has these blotches on his hands, and he's been limping. Who knows? Who knows what is happening? But the U.S. Constitution does not allow him to run again. He's not young like Putin was in 2000. He's not like Viktor Orban. So, and I have to say, American institutions, having covered Congress, having covered the White House, having covered the U.S. Supreme Court for the Dallas Times-Herald long ago, American institutions are battered. And some, like the U.S. Supreme Court, are in really, really, really bad shape right now. But most of them are still standing. Congress, the Republicans in Congress have rolled over to Trump, but Congress as an institution has not collapsed. Basically, the Democrats have managed to block a lot of bad stuff. And the only thing that they have had a difficult time is Republicans are using the rules best they can to steamroll certain things. But generally, the institutions are holding up okay. The media, as Kathleen said, there have been some terrific stories. Some of the corporate media has kowtowed to Trump. And there are some media outlets backing down. But some have doubled down on great journalism, even in very difficult financial times. And I think that the more Trump pushes, the more you're going to see very strong journalists, editors, and reporters trying to inform the people as best as they can. National publications and even local publications, as the local publications have, are fighting for their lives. So that's my big point. But I do want to also say something optimistic about artificial intelligence. Mati had mentioned this before, because I teach multimedia to my students in China. It's Global Business Journalism is the name of the program. And I'm now writing the second edition of textbook, which has to be completely rewritten in large parts, and artificial intelligence is one big part. When I wrote the first edition in 2019, we were generations ago. But we talk about it in class. I'm a big optimist. I understand all of the negative implications and the dangers, and I talk to the students about that first. Don't think that AI is all great. You have to know all the places where there could be problems. But it helps us on the business side. It helps us in what would be called the consumer side, the website interface, how we deal with our customers, how we can produce content or get content to people that they will want to see. Right? How we can get them stories that will engage them. And we also know, I know this from experimenting on my website, we know what people read and don't read. We know what they engage with and where they stay the longest. And I always said when I was a bureau chief for the Houston Chronicle and Hearst, there's so many great stories in Washington. We can do stories that are important and dull, or important and that people also really want to read. And journalists make choices every day. So why not do things that engage readers? Why not do things that reach out to a younger audience, a new audience? Why not be innovative in the way we tell stories? And AI allows that. In terms of reporting, AI can help us a lot. And I won't go into a long list of things, but just a couple of examples. I mean, I find it like the internet was 30 years ago. There are so many more things you can do if you harness artificial intelligence, with all the caveats of the risks of bad information. But anything from transcripts, instantly getting transcripts of a meeting, of something that's happened, that you can scroll through, that used to take hours, or being able to check what a government agency has done. I mean, and transcribe one of their meetings so that you can look very quickly and scan what has happened to see if there's any news in there that you might want to then go back and study for a longer period. To instant analysis of complex databases. And Bloomberg News is one of the sponsors of my program. Bloomberg uses it so well to have when they have complex databases, and they pull out items when there's new economic news. And AI, using AI, they're reporters who know how to harness AI can find what's important very quickly, much more quickly than in the old-fashioned way when I was doing computer-assisted reporting. I used to say it would take me 4 days using computer-assisted reporting to get it done. With AI, you can do it in a day and a half. When I used to do it by hand before there were computers, it would take me two weeks to do it. So again, it's a good tool. if you know what you're doing, if you're not afraid of it, and if you join it. And in writing is another area for journalists where it helps. Not AI writing our stories for us, although Associated Press was one of the first to use it for some business stories, some sports stories that you can use a template for. And it allows you to spit out stories about stock values so your reporters can spend their time on value-added stories. Or you can use it to present 85% of a story, and then the reporters do the analysis or the interviews to finish up the story. It can allow you to be more efficient use of time if you do it this way. Now, I know some news outlets are going to do it just to cut staff, but if you're really good, you can actually use it to be better writer, be a better reporter. And the final area is in multimedia, which is what I teach. And I can tell you this from what my students produce. AI can help you produce pretty amazing multimedia content to go with stories. And I don't mean AI making stuff up, but using the tools that are available through computers. And just a couple of examples from the past year. I mean, one group of my students did something on a project on cyberbullying. And it was like, let's say, Russian, Polish, and Chinese students doing it, and it focused on K-pop, and it was they did it was a multi-part series with video elements and text elements and graphics elements. But one of the things that they did was they interviewed a woman who had been bullied, and they protected her through pixelation and changing her voice. And it was so high quality that it seemed so natural. The way they did the interview, the way it came out on the screen, just looked. To me, it looked like it was ready for a major network, and they explained how they did it, what the program was, and I didn't realize it was so easy to do. Or I've been working with a Pakistani student who worked for the Associated Press of Pakistan as a business reporter, and we've been working on resources for business journalists around the world. And she uses AI as a tool both for visualization and for identifying resources. It's natural. It's natural to a lot of these young people to use the tools that are there. And then we put them on our website, or in that case, we share it with the International Journalists Net, IJNet, which is affiliated with the International Center for Journalists. And finally, we had a project on gender gap in Asia, how women are falling further behind since the pandemic, behind men. And this was one where the group of students used animation. There was a woman who they had interviewed who didn't want her face to be shown at all. And the way they did it was, instead of the pixelization, they created an animation of a person. And it was so engaging because this animated figure was moving her head and had hand motion, that it really drew you in. Whereas if this just had been an audio recording, you might not have paid attention. So again, I'm looking at all the things that you can do. And I think if we can figure out an economic future for our industry, we have young people who are really creative. We have entrepreneurs who are creating new media. I think there's a bright future if we can only get over that hump of figuring out how we pay for it and stay in business. So thank you very much.